He
the
tells the
impact that it
story
had.
when they were in the National Military Command Center, and Cheney, Rumsfeld was there, Dick Myers was there. There was just a couple of other people there, and there was Peter, and there was a retired colonel who was a civilian who was still working there, and he was sitting at the desk. Was sort of his hands kind of up to his lips, like he was praying, and he wasn't watching the TV. And Peter was just enamored that he wasn't watching like everyone else was. And he looked at, and he knew him, and he looked at him. And he said, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "They're coming for us." And he said it wasn't more than 15 seconds after those words left his mouth that the plane hit the Pentagon, and they felt it. He said that the room just moved right and then moved left, knocked, everybody fell down. They thought one colonel probably may have broke his arm because he fell so hard. And they weren't sure what happened. Rumsfeld and Myers went into action and said, there was an admiral that just picked Peter up by the collar of his shirt and said, "Get everybody out. Start getting everybody out. Because I don't know what's happening. I don't know if there's any more coming in or not." There's the gaping hole, and they all just looked up, and here's this huge fireball, 5, 6, 700 feet in diameter, and a big mushroom cloud. And Peter said, his first thought was, "Have we just been hit by a tactical nuke?"
You're listening to the Bill McIntosh Show. Bill McIntosh Show now on with Tony Kimery, and I'm going to tell you all about who he is and how this ties into 9/11 and to remembering two very remarkable individuals who died because of the Pentagon attacks on 9/11. Well, first of all, Anthony Kimery served nearly a decade as a counterintelligence analyst during the waning years of the Soviet Union and the first few years of the Russian Federation. His activities included intelligence collection and monitoring, sensitive site exploitation, as well as other assignments involving counterterrorism. His specializations in homeland security include a wide spectrum of counterintelligence, counterterrorism, intelligence collection, and tradecraft, and the ability to both materialize and discern patterns in disparate and structured all-source intelligence information streams. He's also an award-winning journalist. He's an editor focused on both national and global security matters with decades of experience, including a stint from 2004 to 2017 as editor-in-chief of Homeland Security Today magazine, the de facto journal of record for the Homeland Security community. Currently, Anthony Kimery is editor-in-chief of Intelliscopes, a Homeland and National Security News Insight and Analysis multimedia company which produces the Homeland Security Off the Record talk show that Tony Kimery hosts with experts in national security and narrates the debriefings investigative reports. Both of these are available on YouTube under the terms Homeland Security Off the Record. Tony has written for the Washington Post, Wired, Insight on the News, The Veteran, Vietnam magazines, and his work has been cited in mainstream U.S. media, books, congressional research, service reports, naval postgraduate school master's theses, military publications, and has been footnoted in nearly 100 scholarly papers. He's appeared on TV and radio programs and appeared on programs as prominent as Joe Rogan Questions Everything and other shows as well. He serves on the board, the advisory board of the Mississippi College's Center for Counterterrorism Studies, and he's senior Homeland Security subject matter advisor analyst for All Cyber Advisories, the China 863 analyst reports. We're doing this, Anthony, also in conjunction with Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. Every year they have an article about someone remembering somebody or victims of 9/11 who are unique and merit mention. Just to make something known about those who may not know, the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, founded by Sargis Sangari on 9/11 in 2014, and it's an organization that shares a very unique time with the Pentagon because the Pentagon was celebrating its 60th anniversary from its, its opening on September 11th, 2001. A lot of people don't know that. Apparently, It opened on that same date in 1941. It's an amazing thing. And also, Lieutenant Colonel Sangari founded Neary Center for Strategic Engagement on that same um, uh, date in the calendar, September 11th, but in 2014. So, Anthony, listen, wanted to ask you about, I think, probably two of the most remarkable victims whose work needs to be remembered, but whose names can't be articulated because of the type of work they did. They worked in human intelligence. Tell us about these unique individuals. I guess we want to call them
We call them
Tom and
Tom and Joe, or Tom and Jerry.
Tom, Tom and Jerry. Tom and
I
all
think
right,
I
Tom.
actually we actually referred to them as Pete and Repeat.
Okay, sure. Okay, fine. We'll talk to them as Pete and Repeat. Tell us about Pete and Repeat and who these guys were.
First is
Guys, I
that
assume they were guys, and
yeah,
maybe one or both were female. I don't know.
no, they were both men. First, thank you for having me on your program, and thank
Great to have you on.
the good Colonel for having introduced us. Uh,
Yeah, likewise. Amen.
uh, they were two gentlemen who I had previously worked with in counterintelligence. I had already gotten out. They were younger. They had stayed in. I can't reveal who or what organization they were working with. I can't even mention the acronym, even though I'll call it an intelligence cell. It no longer exists, but it still remains classified, as do their identities. They were involved in human intelligence gathering, primarily um, dealing with threats to any branch of the military at the time. It was a time when we weren't really sure who all of the threats were. 9/11 had not happened yet, although clearly we were aware that Islamic or radical Islam was a problem, going all the way back to the Munich massacre, of the Israelis, Beirut in '83, the Marine barracks bombing, the embassy bombing. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, everyone was pretty much scrambling around trying to figure out who our enemies are and who we needed to be looking out for. There was just a lot of things on the radar. We were involved in counterintelligence, primarily, originally, Soviet era spies, sleepers in the United States, what they call illegals or undocumented. And then when the wall fell, KGB became the FSB, but they still had their own intelligence network set up in the United States. And these two gentlemen were among our team. In fact, there's only one person still alive who was on the team. It was part of an organization that had 5 or 6 different compartmentalized units doing different things under the commander of or under the command of a lieutenant general in Army military intelligence. And that's what we did. They were there at the Pentagon that day. Unfortunately, they did not office there. They did not work there, but they were there for a highly classified briefing. I don't know what it was about. I was going to catch up with them afterwards, have drinks with them, and do the regular chit chat and catch up, because we had not seen each other in a while. Like I said, they continued on. I had already gotten out because of an injury I suffered. They were heroes. They did a lot of great groundwork. They had been involved in classified exfiltrations, infiltrations. They weren't actually part of what we would call today special operations groups or any kind of a special operation force, but that's kind of what they did. It was a whole different organization that, if people remember an old group called the Intelligence Support Activity, or operations called Yellow Fruit, and there was another one, Sea Spray, I believe, that it caused somewhat of a scandal after it was referred to during congressional testimony. Um, so the operation, the groups were kind of broken up and reorganized under a different entity, and they were transferred to another part of the program that was created as part of the breakup of the original intelligence support activity and continued on. Like I said, I had already gotten out. I suffered a leg injury. I wasn't even supposed to be in the field. I turned out to be kind of a reluctant Jack Ryan. At one point, literally getting thrown on a helicopter. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. They were very dear friends of mine. And I was actually en route to the Pentagon. I wasn't going to the Pentagon. I was going to go over and wait till they got through doing what they were doing. And we were going to meet up afterwards and meet up with some of the old members of our team.
Wow. So this, I know it was like maybe a get together for lunch or for a mid-afternoon.
We usually we had a couple of watering holes because they were probably going to be there late into the afternoon or evening. Of course, when that happened, it took a while before I even realized that they had been killed. I didn't know about it until it took several days for me to know it, actually.
Wow. So at that time you were concerned. You didn't know maybe exactly where they were in the Pentagon.
Uh,
Such a
I
massive
just knew,
complex.
well, they were in that wing. There was a particular, I can't even say what it was, but there was a particular organization that had a wing below where the Flight 77 actually hit. And they happened to be there. That's where they were giving a briefing and also being debriefed on a couple of intelligence programs that they were working on at the time.
That's amazing, huh? Reminds
Yeah.
me a little bit of the death of an important FBI official whose name at this moment I don't remember, but he was very well known, and he was in the World Trade Center, and his function was to basically he was the FBI's guy investigating Bin Laden.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. I don't recall his name, but I do know who you're talking about.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so here we have, you know, amazing coincidences that people who are dealing with really the at the tip of the spear in terms of human intelligence,
You
if
know,
that can be stated.
it's kind of like I know you want to talk about this, but it's kind of like what happened when Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah, actually, they're both Iranian backed when they bombed the U.S. embassy in Beirut in '83. It took out our entire Middle East CIA experts, our top experts at the time. Um, Wonderful people, wonderful people. It was much like that. We lost a lot of people. In fact, it set us back for quite a period of time.
Sure, because these are people that, you know, their combined endowment of training and knowledge and language proficiency probably was maybe a couple of centuries, you know.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. I mean, people who are still in this, who have stayed in, or if you've, even put in your 20 years and you stay in, you're talking about a lot of institutional memory and a lot of institutional knowledge, which I think you and I talked about that the other day. We've lost that, or it's being lost, and it's it's a real tragedy.
it's an absolute yes, it's a tremendous loss of treasured human assets who, you know,
Yeah,
you expect them to come to the end of their careers and to be able to brief a lot of people and train a lot of people and pass on the torch to a younger generation of people involved with intelligence gathering and analysis and operations and fieldcraft and all these his
Yeah, I mean,
activity.
most in the intelligence community, there are a lot of archives and records and databases, but you know, as far as knowing the history of things and how things came about and making connections or reading something in a current intelligence stream of whatever it might be, and you read or see something, if you don't know what happened, let's say 20 years ago, you might not make the connection to what you're actually seeing in some intelligence stream right now. And
Probably
that's a lot.
won't,
Yeah.
right?
It happens to
It's
me all the
likely that you
time.
won't.
It happens
Yeah,
to me
it's
all the
like
time. I'm reading something or I'll look at something and I'm going, wait a minute. I know wait a minute, that relates to this and that. And, of course, that's what I did. I had the innate ability enhanced with training and a lot of really cool tools to see patterns in big data, vast amounts of intelligence streams, and make sense of it and then start connecting the dots, which is really how any good intelligence analyst does their work. It's the people like the two gentlemen, Pete and Repeat, who I lost, who were out in the field, actually collecting the dirty work, doing the dirty work, and collecting the intelligence, and then bringing back to the analyst to make sense of.
right. And so they had. Did they have inklings that something like this daring was going to take place on American soil?
There were a lot of us who believed that. We'd already seen the intelligence. I remember when I was driving in, I heard I was in my Chevy Silverado driving in on I think it was on Route 29, driving into to 66 on into to DC, and I heard it on the radio that the first plane had hit the North Tower, and I knew immediately. I just instinctively knew what it was. I didn't even think
Without no,
twice.
without even knowing that, hearing about the second
No,
um,
yeah, the second plane had not hit.
attack.
It was, and I think it was anybody who at the time was privy to intelligence or knew anything about Al Qaeda, Bin Laden, uh, what they had talked about or the chatter. Everybody I know of that had access and knew immediately what had happened before the second plane ever even hit.
Sure, because it's a big, bold attack, asymmetrical, outside the box,
We
and
knew, and we knew that it was their target. After they tried it in I think what was it, '93, when they
February
uh,
'93.
blew up the bomb underneath one of the trade towers. We knew that they were going to do it again. We just didn't know how. Um, People say that there was a failure of imagination to think that they would fly planes into the Pentagon or any other or the trade centers, but no, that wasn't a lack of imagination. There were plenty of us in intelligence who weren't surprised at all. Uh, you know, um,
Right.
there was an incident many, many, many decades back, which actually led to the creation of the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, which is called the Nuclear Emergency Support Team now,
Yeah.
in which uh, there were there was a hijacked plane, and they were if their demands weren't met, they were going to fly it into Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we knew
Oh
that
wow.
planes could be used as vehicles, and we know that no nuclear power plants, the domes constructed over the actual reactors, or the fuel rod containment housing, they're built to try to withstand direct impact by a commercial jetliner. So we knew that something like that could happen. We had to think out of the box, and trust me, you really do think out of the box. You think of every possible thing that could happen, no matter how crazy it may sound, and you develop a contingency operations plan for it.
Right. So yeah, these are the, and also we had the Operation Bojinka, the frustrated Operation Bojinka terror attack, which was going to be absolutely disturbingly spectacular. It would have been involved like 10 airliners, I think, being hijacked or being bombed. Was it
Mhm.
simultaneously over the Pacific? It would have been an unbelievably shocking loss of humanity and a
Yes,
terrible terrorist
it would,
attack.
and there have been a number of potentially catastrophic, devastating attacks that have been stopped that will, people will never know about.
Of course, right. So, looking at Pete and Repeat, any idea on their backgrounds? Can you tell us anything at all about, um, the type of guys they were, um, you know, where
They
they
came
were
up to,
from,
they
what part
came
of the
up to,
country they were from?
um, one was from New York, and the other one was from uh, in the South. I want to say Georgia, Alabama, somewhere in the South. I can't remember now.
Right.
They both came up through the ranks of a particular service. Their MOS was military intelligence, and they went into counterintelligence. Right after. That's what their MOS was, and it stayed with them because at the time, the KGB threat at that time was still huge. They were penetrating. It was the time when they were actively involved in South and Central America and other parts of the world, particularly the United States. We had a very big concern about what we call either sleepers or illegals, some of whom are still being rolled up. They were just good old boys, but they knew that they knew their business. They weren't afraid of anything. They did their jobs. They were true patriots. Um, Sometimes they had to, bend uh, things a little. They didn't break any laws, but they had to bend a few things to save people. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, wow. I bet they did. They had, and their career spanned quite a bit of time going back to the 60s, or not quite that
Uh,
long, or
yeah, well, I'm trying to think when they got in because they were in their mid 50s on 9/11. So they went in right after high school, actually, both of them.
well, yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing, just isn't it great how people from different parts of the countries, probably very different backgrounds,
Had different backgrounds. Yeah,
one a
I mean,
Yankee, one a Southerner.
yeah. But they were patriots. They loved their job and they loved protecting the United States. They were a couple of the best. Well, everybody I worked with were the best. They had your back. Everyone knew. Everyone knew that everyone had everyone's back. They could trust you. They knew that you had integrity. Everyone knew that you were going to do the right thing, the responsible thing. Everyone trusted everyone to do their job, and everyone trusted everyone to have everyone else's back, which is the
Well,
way it
that's great.
should be.
Yeah, sure. And it's such an amazing thing that this all happened. It points to underscores certain traits of our country, characteristics, of the people that believe in the United States and protect it. They've dedicated their lives to protecting it. And so many things came together. In one sense, you could say that, 9/11 united us, brought us together, people from different backgrounds. But in the last couple of years, we've seen our country now becoming incredibly polarized, terribly divided.
Terribly
Um,
divided.
and
Yeah.
it's one of these things that it's so bad that I have no doubt at all that it's affecting our ability to make perform intelligence gathering, and we're developing intelligence assets, and we got away from let's say a culture of competence and excellence and patriotism and integrity to pursue, let's say, other concerns or other objectives that have left us vulnerable and to such a great extent. You know, um,
Yeah, there are. there are still old as well as new and emerging threats that people would be shocked to know, especially the new and emerging threats people would be shocked about. And, my problem is that the media in general certainly does not have any institutional knowledge or memory at all. What they do report on, they don't report very well, um, or they don't even report it at all, or they just don't even recognize what needs to be reported on. And I attribute that to their lack of subject matter expertise in homeland or national security or intelligence, and not having that kind of background. And they certainly show their lack of institutional knowledge and memory all the time. I mean, some of the things that I hear, uh, they could easily research. It might take them some time, but I guess I don't want to invest in it. I don't know. It's sad because the state of open source intelligence capabilities now, very advanced OSINT capable technologies that are available now, is incredible. And of course,
Sure.
in the intelligence community, it's part of the all source collection process. Back in the day, we didn't have the ways to access it and cross-reference it and index it and what have you. We didn't have social media and other things like that, or big data that we could mine, but now we do. So all source intelligence has become a very integral part of the all source intelligence collection process. Um, and there are journalists. They have access. Well, I guess if they want to pay for it, they have access to some of those kinds of capabilities. But then you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what to search for. Know what kind of a search string to look for. You have to have an ability to say, oh, this dot connects to that, or maybe I should look at this and see where that goes. Even if, I guess I'm saying, even if you get the technology, you still have to know what to do with it.
Right. And it also takes a certain amount of circumspection when you're a news gatherer or somebody who's reporting on things, that you can't always have a huge headline, a huge impactful headline, that's going to, generate millions of clicks. You may not be able to pull it off. How about we get it right? How about we develop a good relationship working with people in the government, and try to report impartially, but of course, give pushback and question things that don't seem to add up. So I guess these two human intelligence figures, did they do we know much about them beyond that? Their families, did the government take care of their families afterwards? Can you comment on
Yes,
that?
yes, they were taken care of.
Right. So then, of course, we look at the gaping craters in know-how that their loss probably constituted. Were they able, and this becomes a rhetorical question, you know, was the intelligence community able to, you know, uh, fill the breach for the sudden losses of very, very skilled intelligence figures? Or were they completely caught flat-footed on that score concerning
Uh,
institutional memory preservation?
well, I mean, there was certainly unique knowledge that both of them had, um, that was very valuable and should have been preserved. But I don't think that it really impaired any capabilities. It was just a huge personal loss, and it was an intelligence loss in the sense of the things that they knew, the operations that they had been on, and what they could talk about within classified circles, and or give advice or relate this or that. But I don't think that it really impaired any any important collection capabilities. It was just a huge loss to the ability to have more people like them doing that.
Right. I mean, it could impart the knowledge and the skills, right?
Exactly. I mean, they were skilled instructors as well, because they were, there were people coming up through the ranks that they had to uh,
Coach.
teach certain tradecraft to.
Right. Wow. Amazing thing, a sad thing. So, do you think the intelligence community can find some sort of a way to address the whole issue of institutional memory and maintaining that flame lit and to pass the baton of knowledge and criteria, analytical abilities, that ability to see emerging threats with disparate information. Um,
I think that
have you
there,
making any
yeah,
progress?
yeah, I think, not think, I know that there are many seasoned veterans in all throughout the intelligence community who have a lot of institutional knowledge and memory, and manuals have been written, guidelines have been written, and a lot of them prepare their own ways of doing things as they're teaching new analysts coming up. Of course, the technology is very useful, but they the people coming up through the ranks are very bright. These are bright analytical people, and most of them have an innate ability at pattern recognition and connecting dots. And they know that they have access to all of these enormous databases of information, but their instructors and the people who help them to develop their skills and understanding, they're still there. I don't think that there's a huge gap there. It's just over time, through attrition, we're going to continue to lose that capability, is what I'm afraid of.
Sure. Tell us about you were affected by 9/11 and because of the loss of several people. You also knew some people who were on the flight. Can you talk about that? Like Flight
Uh,
77, American Airlines Flight 77
yeah,
that slammed into the
yeah.
Pentagon.
I had moved to, after I'd gotten out, I moved down to Culpeper, Virginia, which is about 65 miles south of DC. Bought an old historic 1870 home down there. And there was a couple there in Culpeper that I had met, and I knew. And it wasn't until afterwards that I learned that they had been on Flight 77. Um,
Amazing.
then, if you remember the Washington or the DC sniper,
Oh,
who
yes. Yeah.
arguably was engaged in jihad, one of his victims was a woman I knew very well. She was shot in the head with her husband as they were walking in the parking lot to their car at Home Depot in Falls Church, Virginia. She had just left the agency. In fact, I'd had lunch with her maybe 2 weeks earlier, and we were discussing other opportunities for her within the intelligence community after she had retired from the agency. And she eventually went to work for the FBI, what was then the FBI's the NIPIC, the National Infrastructure Protection Center, which after the Department of Homeland Security was stood up, it was merged into the National Protection Director or something. I can't remember the exact directorate, but
Sure.
yeah, and her, so that was a great loss. And of course, the Oklahoma City bombing. I'm from Oklahoma City originally. I wasn't living here at the time. I was in DC for 17 years. And family, friends, we all knew somebody who was killed when McVeigh blew up the Alfred Murrah Federal Building.
And so,
It's
what
very
is it?
it's very personal to me. Not to mention the fact that my father served in the OSS.
Oh, he did.
He did,
Which
yes.
which did he serve? In which country did he serve in? Did he was he behind the
Well,
lines?
yes, he was. He was officially attached to 2 times to the 501 and the 506 PIR of the 101st. Yeah, he was behind the lines. Um,
Wow.
and then after he got out, he joined the agency, segued in, and stayed in through Korea, and then got out. As he told me, he began to see the writing on the wall in Southeast Asia and didn't want anything to do with it anymore.
Oh, so okay, great. Well, and you also know, I think it was a Dr. Peter Margella, who was he was he on site at the Pentagon when the attack occurred, or was he just?
Yes, he was not very far away. And if people want the best, what I consider the best inside, firsthand, personal account of what happened that morning, they should listen to my interview or Peter's talking about that morning and what happened, because he was not very far away from where it happened. In fact, he had a very high position. He was chief of medical plans and operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as the medical plans and response advisor to the president aboard the National Airborne Command Center, which he would have been on that morning if it had been maybe half an hour or an hour later, because that morning he was going to be on a highly classified training uh, uh, simulation on board the National Airborne Operations Center, Night Watch, they call it derisively. They call it the Doomsday Plane. And it had been an hour, half an hour, hour later, he would have been on it, and I'm quite certain he probably would. The training exercise would have been deactivated, and he probably would have been redirected to meet up with Bush.
But he's nearby. Was he actually in the building?
Yes, he was. He was. I mean, he was very close to what is called the National Military Command Center, which is DoD's command and communications hub for the National Command Authority, which is the President, Secretary of Defense. In fact, it was Peter, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, Joint Chairman, JCS Co-Chair, U.S. Air Force General Richard Myers, and just a handful of other senior officers who were in the National Military Command Center at the time. And no one knew what was going on. In fact, he was in the NMCC when Cheney gave Rumsfeld the orders to shoot down any commercial passenger plane in or around the restricted Washington, D.C. airspace. He was right in the thick of it.
Amazing. So then he was, and by the way, did he sustain any injuries, or he was not close enough for that to take
Well, they
place?
weren't very far away. I mean, the NMC, when they got into the National Military Command Center, I mean, the fire was already coming through the walls and the ceiling. He inhaled a lot of nasty stuff, and he doesn't talk about it a lot, but I'm sure that he's had problems since then. And of course, he knows people and helps people directly because they were probably, I don't know, 90 yards maybe from the impact zone.
Yeah, it's very close because I mean the explosive force of a jetliner flying. They estimated it was going 530 miles per hour when it slammed into I think the first floor of the Pentagon. Uh, with a lot of fuel, several tons of highly flammable fuel.
He
The
tells the
impact.
story when they were in the National Military Command Center, and Cheney, I mean, Rumsfeld was there, Dick Myers was there. There was just a couple of other people there, and there was Peter, and there was a retired colonel who was a civilian who was still working there, and he was sitting at the desk, was with sort of his hands kind of up to his lips, like he was praying, and he wasn't watching the TV. And Peter was just enamored that he wasn't watching like everyone else was, and he looked at and he knew him, and he looked at him. And he said, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "They're coming for us." And he said it wasn't more than 15 seconds after those words left his mouth that the plane hit the Pentagon, and they felt it. He said the room just moved right and then moved left, knocked everybody fell down. They thought one colonel probably may have broke his arm because he fell so hard, and they weren't sure what happened. Um, Rumsfeld and Myers went into action and said, there was an admiral that just picked Peter up by the collar of his shirt and said, "Get everybody out. Start getting everybody out, because I don't know what's happening. I don't know if there's any more coming in or not."
Absolutely.
And Peter kind of got dragged with a crowd because they were in the chairman's corridor, where the SecDef comes in, where the Joint Chief of Staff chairman comes in, and they were ushered down in this corridor. And of course, there's the gaping hallway, and they all just looked up, and here's this huge fireball, 5, 6, 700 feet in diameter and a big mushroom cloud. And Peter said, his first thought was, have we just been hit by a tactical nuke? Nobody knew what
Oh
had
my
happened.
gosh. Yeah, and nobody said, "Hey, that's far-fetched." No.
Yeah. And then they realized, oh my God, we've got to get back inside because we're going to be in charge of the response. Because at that time, I forget what the name of the organization was, and Peter was responsible for it. It was the military's civilian support to civilian authorities in the event of a disaster. I can't think of the exact name. And he said, my God, because we're probably going to have to react to this. We're going to be, have to respond to this. We have to get back in. And he said, just as they were coming back in to go up the stairs, the Pentagon's security police, they already were there. They had their bakalavas on, and they had miniguns strapped to their chest, and they saw them and they racked those guns and pointed right at them. And Peter said, they both held up their cards and said, "Look, we're NMCC. We're the medical guys. We've got to get back in. We've got to take care of this."
Oh, wow.
So people need to really listen to his story, because like I said, it's probably the best firsthand inside account I've ever heard from anybody.
Wow, no, that sounds like what an incredible eyewitness testimony he must have about 9/11 at the Pentagon. So, well, listen, Anthony, it's been great having you on the Bill McIntosh Show to
Oh, Bill,
discuss
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
two real people. It's my pleasure. Two real people, two human intelligence professionals who tragically died, being, basically martyred, for serving the country they loved, at the Pentagon, giving important information to our military leaders to be able to protect our country. And, in the service to our nation, they were killed tragically. These people who,
This is the first time I've actually talked about them too. I'll have you know.
wow.
So I appreciate you asking me
Oh,
and
it's
giving me
fine.
the opportunity. At some point, I've been working on a screenplay about that whole period of my life, so I can kind of honor a lot of these people. Um, so yeah, I appreciate the opportunity because they were true patriots, and it was a terrible loss.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's amazing, to think that they had their families had such remarkable loved ones that died, but they can't really be recognized. Isn't that something?
It, it
Because
um, you know,
the
it's
caliber of their service was so
yeah.
special.
I mean, it's not just CIA undercover agents. I mean, there's elements of special forces that cannot be identified.
Right. It's what do they say at the CIA headquarters? Our failures get publicized, and our biggest successes
Yeah,
remain
yeah, yeah, yeah. Our
anonymous.
successes are never, our successes are never talked about, but our failures always are.
Right. So great. Well, listen, Anthony, it's great to have you on the Bill McIntosh Show. Godspeed to you. Hope we can have you on again to talk about other really important issues
Yes, sir.
having to do with domestic intelligence and the defense of the United States of America. The New Center for Strategic Engagement also thanks you for being able to be part of this important commemorative edition of the show. And we look forward to having conversations with you again, Tony.
Bill, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and give my regards to the Colonel.
Will do. Thank you so much, Tony. Bye-bye.